Welcome to Internally Guided Life, a podcast to help you unlock a life of balance, fulfillment, and joy. I'm Kayla Sweet, and together we're going to have fun and create change from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back, my friends. We are here today as spring is starting to peek through. I don't know where everyone's at, but I'm in Indiana and it's like I can feel that it's coming. So I'm very excited today just about the weather changing. So that might come through in my energy. I've got that spring energy about me today, but I'm really excited, which I know I say that a lot. I'm an excitable person, but I'm really excited about our episode today because we're going to be talking about something that I think everybody could benefit from, and that is mastering our focus and our productivity and being able to really channel our energy in effective and efficient ways, and in doing that with a sense of self-kindness and really moving towards a greater purpose by maximizing what we're able to do and doing it well. And I have an expert joining us today to help me have this conversation. So our guest is Cindy Baker. She is the founder of Cindy Baker Coaching, a coaching and education company for entrepreneurs. She has her master's degree in counseling, and she has over 19 years of experience as an educator, which is phenomenal. I spent 1 year as a high school teacher and it was great, but 19 years is very impressive. Her mission is to share the success secrets that she's discovered on her own journey as an entrepreneur with ADHD, and her tools help people to be positive, prepared, and productive. Who doesn't want that? So welcome, Cindy. We are so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am excited to hear all of the amazing tips and tricks that you're going to share with us about focus. But before we get there, I would love for you to share a little bit about your personal journey, your story with everybody.
Yeah. So I actually have a background in youth ministry. That's how I started. And then I got a master's in counseling and decided to switch over to school counseling, and then became a teacher and did various jobs in education. And while I was working with adolescents, I was working with a lot that had ADHD and their parents. And I started thinking, I really relate to these symptoms. I think I have this, this really sounds like me. And at the time, it wasn't really common to hear about adults getting diagnosed, but nowadays you hear about it a lot. But I got a diagnosis as an adult, and so then I was just so curious. I wanted to know everything I could about adult ADHD. And so I read books and went to workshops and, tried things, figured out what worked, what didn't, and finally put together a framework, a kind of a structure of habits and routines and strategies, and just became wildly successful. I went from just bouncing all over the place to really having focus. Stayed in the career of education for 19 years, like you said, level 5 teacher, got married. And, before that, I was kind of like not committal. So I married late in life, and I started this business while I was still teaching. And now I'm doing it full time. I did all that with ADHD. So I'm really enjoying helping other people, because they don't have to go through all those years of trial and error. I kind of got the secret figured out. And so I don't just work with ADHD people, but the interesting thing is, if you're the type of person that gets distracted easily, these ADHD-friendly strategies work, whether you have it or not.
That was one of the things that really stood out when we talked initially was that your strategies are ADHD friendly, but they're beneficial to anyone who struggles with focus. And I haven't met a single person, ADHD or not, who doesn't struggle with focus and productivity, at least from time to time, because there's so many
Sure.
distractions in the world. And I am somebody who does have ADHD, so I've been on my own journey, and I'm going to be listening extra closely today to see if I can pick up any new tips and tricks because there's just always a new distraction waiting in every corner, right?
Mhm.
So should be a really fun conversation. But I would love to hear a little bit about how you mentioned that once you got this diagnosis, that it kind of like stuff started to click. You started to read up, you found all these strategies. So how did the diagnosis itself kind of change your perspective on productivity and focus and the way that you approach that in your own life?
Yeah, it made a big difference because um, I kept trying to follow the gurus out there and I couldn't get it to work and I was frustrated. And I thought, I know I'm smart, but there's just I can't seem to get it together. And it's because I wasn't using strategies that worked with the way my brain is wired. And once I figured out and learned about the ADHD way of thinking and learned that it's a neurological disorder, it's not a character flaw, you know, that made a big difference because then I was able to do things in sync with the way that I think. And that, makes a difference. I mean, there are definite challenges to ADHD, and we all know about those. But what I like to do in my coaching program is help people leverage their strengths because there are a lot of strengths that come with having an out of the box thinking. And so I've kind of learned how to leverage that, and it's made a big difference.
Yeah, I'm hearing so many interesting things just from your story alone, from the first thing that really stood out was that this is a neurological disorder and not a character flaw. I feel like so many people that struggle with these symptoms, you start to internalize it. Like, is something just wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Or other people seem to be doing this. Why is it so hard for me?
Mhm.
So that is a huge thing for your self-esteem, for your sense of self-worth, for your confidence to recognize like I can work with this once I know what I'm dealing with and
Yeah,
there's nothing innately wrong with me, right?
that's right. And that's one of the most rewarding things about doing this for me is that I'm able to instill hope in people. And they're like, "Wait, there's another way to live." I don't have to be late all the time and forget things and um I can be calm and prepared and on time and yeah, you can, even with ADHD. And you mentioned self-esteem. It's not just what we say to ourselves, but when we're growing up with ADHD, we might get criticism from parents or teachers, and they don't really understand why we're doing what we're doing, or they think we're just not listening, or we don't care, or we're lazy. All these labels, and you do internalize that, and then you add to that your own dialogue in your head and comparison and trying to um, just being hard on yourself, and it takes a toll. So that's another thing we work on in my coaching program is just to really understand and accept the good, the bad, and the ugly of ADHD because you got it. You might as well learn how to work with it, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
I I love the strengths approach for one. I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach, so I'm like all about the strengths. Like anytime
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
leverage strengths, but thinking about the specific strengths with ADHD is interesting because I think I had to do that to like survive. So I have a hyperactive type, so it's like a lot of energy all the time. Very excited, as the listeners know.
yeah,
And I've learned to use that to my benefit. But like you said, in school, when I couldn't sit still in my seat and there was all of the fidgeting and all of that going on, like people were concerned. So I just
mhm,
resonate so deeply with so many pieces of that. And I love your approach to just help people own who they are, work with it, leverage it, and go where they want to go.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's another benefit of group coaching is just knowing you're not alone and people get it. You're in a group with people who get it. And whether they have ADHD or not, they're struggling with those type of symptoms, you know,
Yeah.
and once you figure out that there's a label for it, some light bulbs come on. You can look back and go, oh, that's why that happened, or that's why I reacted the way I did, or, it's comforting a little bit.
Yeah, you feel like you're not alone. You've got people that understand. I think
Mhm.
that's
Your,
such a
your
big,
brain is not broken.
yeah. Yeah, you are not broken. So it's
Mhm.
just you function differently. I love in recent years the way it's been kind of rebranded as neurodivergent, right? And I feel like it's just different. It's different than maybe what might be typical, but it doesn't mean it's worse or wrong, right?
Right, exactly. In fact, there are tons of super successful people that actually attribute their success to ADHD. I was just online looking at flights for something that's coming up later on, and uh, David Neilman is the founder of JetBlue Airlines, and he was interviewed once, and they said, if you could take a pill that would take away your ADHD, would you take it? And he said, no. He said, yes, there's some challenges, but the risk taking, problem solving, creativity, um, he thinks that's why he was successful. He could look out on an industry that had all these problems, and his brain would just naturally search for a better way to do things.
Mm.
And I think that comes from, having to compensate for the challenges that we've had with ADHD. Our brain just figures out workarounds,
Yes,
naturally.
100%. Yeah. To
Mhm.
to get to get by, right? Like you have to
Yeah,
function in society still. So you figure out how to be effective as much so as possible. But I think that what you're doing is streamlining that process so that
yeah.
it's more accessible to more people with less of the trial and error part.
Mhm.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you mentioned that you had your start in ministry, then you worked as an educator, you've got this background in counseling. How does all of that impact the way that you show up in your coaching practice and the way you support people with focus and productivity and all of these other components that come up?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask some of my clients, I guess, but I do think that all of those things build on each other. Um, and there are lots of coaches out there, different kinds of coaches, but the good thing about what I do is that I have a little bit of counseling, a little bit of ADHD coaching, a little bit of business coaching. It's everything because, I'm older. I've lived through a bunch of different careers and had all this different training. I actually have two master degrees. And so I just am able to kind of mesh different things together. And now, it's not therapy, but having that counseling training really helps me to, let's say a client is just stuck, and it helps me to figure out or help them figure out why they're stuck and what they need to do to move forward. Um, and then being in business, I'm able to help people with business and especially when it comes to productivity and doing what they need to do. There's those high impact tasks, getting them done in half the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're all build. I've always been in helping professions, and I think there's so many people on the internet. People just have to um, choose somebody they really can relate to. And I'm not saying I'm the best coach out there, but um, I really don't love being on video, but I'm on video all the time because I feel like people need to get to know me. They
Yeah.
need to see, hey, I like her teaching style, or um, she seems like she cares, or something, where they can feel like, yeah, I can align with where she's coming from. I think that's important.
100%. It sounds like you just have such a wealth of experience. I'm so curious about like your journey and your life history. So thank you for humoring me here in the beginning, getting a little deeper into that than we did when we talked before. But it sounds like you're able to just bring all of that in a really holistic way to your clients. And it's such a great point to say that there are so many coaches out there. And the most important thing is that people find someone they resonate with and that they trust. Like there's so many approaches and they could all be effective, but if you don't trust the person and you don't click with them, then it's probably not
Right,
gonna be that effective for you, right? Yeah.
right.
So I want to dig into the reason we're here. Let's talk about focus to start, which I know focus, time management, productivity, it's all kind of like interwoven. But how do you approach this idea of focus and what tools or tips or strategies kind of align with supporting us in actually being able to do it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will say, if I just had a few more hours in the day that to get everything done. And I think that's a wrong way to look at it because we don't really need more hours in the day. If you have more hours, you're just going to spend them the same way you're spending the hours you have now. And so that focus piece is really important. When you learn how to manage your attention and your focus, then you can do what matters in the time that you have. And then you can build the life and the business that you want. So I use a method called the focus sprint strategy. And you basically um, find your energy zone or your best, like the times of day when you're the at your peak, um, physically, mentally, emotionally, and then notice the times that you're not and that you're sleepy or you're forgetting things or whatever. You just pay attention to that for a few days, and then you pick your task. And I have a lot of different things I walk my clients through and helping them prioritize. um, but I tell people just write down your top three most important things that you need to do. Write them down the day before, put them on your desk. So when you walk in, it's right there, whether it's your home office or if you have a 9 to 5. And that way you're not spending a bunch of time figuring out what you're supposed to do. You've already predetermined it. And you take the first one and you work on it in a focused sprint, meaning kind of like the Pomodoro method. You put your phone in another room, you set boundaries with people around you, put on noise canceling headphones, whatever you got to do. And you set a timer and just work in deep focus on that one thing until the timer goes off. Then you get to take a break. And ideally, it should be 90 minutes because that's when your energy cycles kind of ebb and flow. But you could start with 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then 60 minutes, and kind of experiment with it. But the idea is that you've already decided what you're going to do. So you're not wasting part of that time figuring out what you're going to do. And then if you just do those three things, and you do those first, even if you don't get to anything else on your to-do list, you've already won because you've done the most important things. What most people do is they'll have a big to-do list and they'll just take the path of least resistance. They'll say, oh, I really need to do such and such, but gosh, this going to take so much energy. I'll just scroll on my phone for a few minutes just to check and then 30 minutes goes by and you're watching dog videos. And all those little 30 minutes that go by, all those little pockets of wasted time, you know, that adds up. It makes a big difference. So that's a ultra simplified explanation, but and of course there's a lot more to it. In my coaching, we even talk about clutter,
Mm.
digital, physical, mental. There's decision making, all kinds of things. But
Yeah. Yeah, this is such a complex thing to try to cover even within like an hour of podcast. So
yeah,
we'll scratch the surface and then if people want to know more, they can come find you and dig
that's
in
right.
even deeper. But I heard some interesting things from you. So first off, I am a big fan of this. I think I do this without realizing I do it because I block focus time and then I have specific things I have to get done within that time. Like that's my thinking time where I don't talk to people, I don't do other things, right? So it's kind
Mhm.
of like that sprint you're talking about. I just I didn't know what it was called. It's just how I survive life, right?
Yeah.
But part of I think what happened to me, and I imagine this is fairly common, is when you have that time and you haven't decided what should be done in that time in advance and it's not written down anywhere, then you waste almost most of that time trying to figure out what to do or where to start. How do you
Yeah.
help people with the prioritization piece of it? Because, yeah, to focus, you kind of need to know where to direct your energy. So, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, well, there's different things that we do. One, some of your listeners may have heard of this. It's the Eisenhower matrix. President Dwight Eisenhower had this famous saying where he said, things that are urgent are seldom important, and things that are important are seldom urgent. And so that's the way he prioritized according to urgency and importance. And so that's one of the things that they'll do if clients are just really confused about what to do, then we'll just do a brain dump, write down everything on your mind, and then we would draw little quadrants and label urgent and important, and then take those things and put them in the different quadrants. And the ones that have an up close deadline, those are urgent. And if those are important, you do those first. If they're important but don't have to be done right away, then you get your planner out and you schedule them.
Mm.
If they're um, not as important, but they're urgent, then, like answering emails or whatever, then you maybe could get somebody else to do it for you. You can delegate. Um, there's different ways that you can handle that, or you schedule a time to handle those. And then if they're not important and not urgent, we just work on getting them off the list. I mean,
Yeah.
you can even put a little file aside that says would be nice to do one day.
Right.
Just put them all in there so they're out of your brain and you don't have to think about it. But it's really dumb to just keep the same things on your list and then just rewrite them, you know, because you're not going to do them. And then all you're
Right.
doing is taking up bandwidth in your brain, worrying about, oh, I didn't get to that. Well, you just take it off, If it's not urgent, it's not important, it's okay. You don't have to do it.
Right.
Because we have so many ideas and we want to do everything. Um, and so part of it is just brutally cutting your list, you know. And I'm not a big fan of to-do lists anyway. Make a to-do list, but then take those priorities and make a today list.
Oh, I
Make it
love that.
smaller and work off of that.
Yes.
Otherwise, what we do is we'll look at the list, everything looks equally important. And so what do we do? The easiest thing. And we take our peak energy time when we're the most alert and we waste it doing emails. That's like using a bulldozer to pull up weeds in your yard. You want to use your peak focus time for your most important tasks.
Yes. And that you brought up something I was thinking that was gonna be my next question was what about when people feel like everything on the list is equally important? And you kind of got to that because I think that's an issue sometimes, right? Is like you see this whole thing, it all feels important, and you don't know where to start, and then you're overwhelmed, and then you either do the easiest thing or worse, you do nothing, get on your phone and you scroll or whatever, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're a business owner or entrepreneur, 80% of your activities in your business need to be revenue producing. And it's usually the other way around. But if you're spending 2 hours, uh, on Canva trying to find the perfect font for a social media post, that's not good use of your time. you know so you have to think about what's going to move the needle in my business. I mean, if you're not making money, you're not going to stay in business. So you got to think about that and think about ways that you could get somebody else to do some of those other things, and you only do the things that you're really good at and that only you can do. And of course that takes time to get to that point. I'm not there yet. I don't have, I wish I had enough growth fast enough to be able to hire somebody to do a whole bunch of stuff, but it takes a while to get to that point, but you at least head in that direction. And every day you ought to do something that involves sales or marketing if you're in business.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And even I think, outside of entrepreneurship, if you're working in a company for somebody else, you still have a personal brand to manage and you need to be delivering some kind of results. Like you need to be showing your value if you want to move up, if you want to get bonuses, like whatever it might be that matters to you within whatever structure you're working in, like focusing on what I'm hearing is the high impact stuff that matters most when you have the most energy to focus on it.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're working in a corporate job, your boss is the one who decides what those important things are. And so you have to make sure you're not just doing what you want to do, but what you know your boss thinks is important.
Right. What needs to be
You may
done to
not always
align.
agree,
Yeah.
you know.
Right. So, what do you notice are some of the biggest barriers or hurdles or mistakes that people kind of find themselves trapped in as they're trying to narrow their focus and be more productive?
Well, there's a lot of things. This, I think perfectionism sometimes gets in the way. So we overthink things and we want to wait until all of the circumstances are perfect before we get started, or we work on something too long before we get it out into the world because it's not perfect. So that's one thing. I think just having too many things, like not knowing how to say no,
Mm.
um, getting overcommitted in your schedule, trying to jump through hoops to please people, especially if you have ADHD. You're probably used to doing that, just trying so hard to please people out of your comfort zone. And so you end up piling on too many things, or you're impulsive if you have ADHD. You say, yes, I can do that.
Uh-huh.
You go look at your calendar, like, what did I just commit to? You know,
Relate to
so
that, yes, at a soul level.
some of that happens. Or you have FOMO, and you're like, oh, I want to do all this. It's so fun. I want to do this. I want to do that. You can't do it all. So you have to pare down the number of tasks. And when you have a big task, that's where that overwhelm comes in sometimes. It seems so big, so complicated. So you have to really break it apart even more than you think you should into like the tiniest little micro steps. And then you just schedule those out like little milestones and you celebrate every time you've meet a milestone, and
Yeah.
it makes it less overwhelming.
I love that you
That's an
mentioned
example of it.
celebrating too. Like that's such an
Yeah,
important
it makes it
thing.
more fun. And, instead of, because we're not, if you have ADHD, delayed gratification is not our favorite thing. We like to have that dopamine hit right away. So if you can break something up into little steps, then let's say you had to write a big report or something, and then you break it up into a little, like today I'm going to write the outline. Tomorrow I'm going to do, and each time you do a little piece of it, you go, yay, I did it. I get to go watch puppy videos,
Right.
or whatever, but a little pat on the back, because if you're waiting all the way until the big thing is done before you congratulate yourself, it loses momentum. You don't
Yeah.
feel motivated.
100%. That's been very key on my journey. So that's why I'm so glad you mentioned that. And that's another thing that I think it's important across the board, but probably, especially for people with ADHD, but just to give yourself permission to be excited and be happy and celebrate that you did a thing. Like so
Yeah,
often we check it off the list, we go on to the next thing. There's no joy in it whatsoever. You're just doing the next
yeah.
thing. And our lives should be more fun than that.
Well, and there is some satisfaction to checking something off a list. There's that closure, and but you're right. You do have to. I mean, so many times we'll make a mistake and that's all we think about. But
Hmm.
we probably did, yeah, we did that one thing wrong. We probably did 10 things right.
Yeah,
That's why I think that's important.
100%. So, where do you see procrastination coming in with all of this? Like when you have something and a date is established for when such a thing should be done by, whether that's a self-imposed date or other imposed or whatever it might be. I know I personally have the tendency to wait until I'm very close to that that date to do the thing, and that's because that's when I'm the most excited about it, and that's when I have the most
Mhm.
energy to do it. If I try to do it too far in advance, it doesn't feel very stimulating. Well, how do
Uh,
you work with that?
well, I'll tell you later. No, I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, in fact, I have a little free mini course on how to beat procrastination. I'll give your listeners. It's at
Oh, that'd be amazing.
waitnomore.net. Um, but procrastination, there's a lot of different reasons that we do it. Um, some of it is that kind of that perfectionism, that fear of failure. Um, we're afraid of getting started because we don't really know what we're doing. We don't know how to start. That's where breaking things down into little steps and then making little mini deadlines along the way. You have to make your own deadlines sometimes. And if
Yeah.
you know that about yourself and you know you tend to work at the last minute, then you have to work around that. You have to trick your brain. If there's something due tomorrow and you know you procrastinate, you as badly as you want to wait, just do that first and get it over with because you know you're going to have less energy if you wait late in the day, you know. But there's a lot of psychology that goes into um, beating procrastination. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I meet so many entrepreneurs that have ADHD, and life is just like one emergency to the next. It's this self-imposed crisis because they wait till the last minute
Uh-huh.
and then they panic and then they go crazy, and it's just a very stressful way to live.
It's
And
like up and down. Yeah.
if you do that year after year, as you get older, it really takes a toll. So you want to build some different habits for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the self-imposed deadlines, that's what I've had to try to force myself to do is like if something doesn't have a deadline, I have to make it a deadline, but I have to make myself believe that it's an urgent that it's an urgent deadline,
Mhm.
even if it's completely arbitrary, because if I don't put a date on it, then my motivation is just not as high to do it.
Yeah, and that's common.
Yeah, this is such a great conversation. So, when we're thinking about focus within productivity and distractions, how do you how do you see self-awareness kind of like playing into this larger picture of really knowing yourself and getting to understand, like you said, if you know that about yourself that you procrastinate, like then you can manage for it. How do you see self-awareness just within this larger picture of productivity, focus, etc.?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the first things that we cover in my coaching program is understanding how your brain works. And we look at it as an ADHD brain, but I'd say half the people that go through my program don't have ADHD, but they really still relate. Um, so you do have to understand that. And we go through what the common challenges are and the symptoms and just that, like you said, self-awareness, just being aware, knowing um, and knowing about how you tend to work and then anticipating that ahead of time. Like a lot of people with ADHD have what we call hyper focus, where they'll just lose track of time because they're so engaged in something. And if you know there's an activity that you're going to tend to hyper focus on, then you might want to save it to the end of the day so that you at least get your other stuff done. Or if you're going to do it at the beginning of the day, set a timer, you know,
Mm.
because you know you're going to lose track of time. So whatever you just be observant and jot things down about your work style, your work habit, um, and just be intentional about working around that, you know. And sometimes you can just go with the flow if you if you feel like doing something. Like there was a time I just felt like cleaning out the kitchen pantry. It wasn't on my to-do list, but I was like, I feel like doing it. I'm just going to go with it. So I cleaned it out. It didn't take me very long, but sometimes you can just kind of go with your feelings, but then there are going to be times when you're going to have to do things you don't feel like doing, and
Yeah.
that's that's just part of being a grown up.
Right. Right. It sounds like, we have this ability to we get to create what our lives look like and what works best for us, but you have to kind of know your starting point and you need to know what the parameters are for success at this time and point in your life. And you need to work around that.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
Um, are there, you've shared several, kind of tips and tricks as far as, you can do this prioritization using the matrix, trying to figure out what is the most high impact things, having that focused sprint time, those blocks, all super helpful tips, strategies. Are there any other habits or routines that you find to be really useful for people to ultimately improve these focus and
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot, but this is going to sound so basic, but use a planner. If you're not using a planner, whether it's digital or paper, doesn't matter. People say, what's the best planner? I mean, I have a planner out on Amazon if you want a paper one, but the best planner is the one you'll use.
yeah.
That's the best one. And so use it every day. Look at it, write it. I've got a paper planner. I went back to paper because I just like it. I like writing on the paper. It just makes me feel better. And I have it open all the time. Um, and I look at it on a regular basis, at least 3 times a day. And before I schedule anything. And so when you have a planner, you can also set appointments with yourself. Yeah, you could cheat and not show up to the appointment, but you probably won't because you're just used to keeping appointments. So if you write it on there and you have already predetermined what you're going to do in that block of time, it's much easier to make yourself do it than if it's just floating around in your head. So I'd say you use a planner. Um, and another just really basic thing is get enough sleep.
Mm.
Sleep and exercise are two of the best things you can do for ADHD. Um, you got to get that stress out, the wigglies, you got to get those out, and you've got to have your your brain reset at night in order to make good decisions and have sound judgment. If you're running a business, you can't and I've struggled with sleep and but you have to be intentional about trying to fix it if you do have sleep problems, because that makes a difference. So those are two kind of like
Yeah,
uh not commonly mentioned
that's so
things that I would start
important.
with.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's so funny. I feel like listening to you, I'm hearing like the all the things I had to learn the hard way cheat sheet
I know.
because I have like I live off of my planner. I can't function
But
without it.
that's the beauty of my coaching program is, and I tell people this when I'm trying to get people to sign up, I say, look, I can save you all of those years of trial and error that I took. I don't want anybody to have to go through all that. And I always say, my mess has become my message.
Mm.
There's an easier way to live. And, nobody was born knowing how to do all this. And having that accountability is so important too. Because, I get on these podcasts and I share strategies, and I'm thinking, half the people listening are going to go, "Oh, that's great," and then they won't do it
Yeah.
because you really need support and a structure to apply it to your life, and then the support that you need to implement the strategies. Strategies alone are not enough, and so Anyway, I would just encourage your listeners, whether it's my coaching program or another one, get some support, and it just makes it so much easier, you know.
Yes, 100%. That's such a great point to bring up. And obviously, like, I have a lot of coaches on the show. I'm a coach, a big advocate for coaching.
Mhm.
And I try to make the podcast something that, people can take tangible things away. But you're so right. Like, even if you're learning tangible things, and I'm sure some of my listeners are very self-motivated and you're taking these things and you're running with it. But there's also probably a lot of you who listen and you feel inspired and then you get stuck. And that
Mhm.
accountability is it's priceless. Like what you can do when you have somebody supporting you, helping you to organize your thoughts, helping you to
Yeah.
stay on track, keep your commitments to yourself, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, because you're right. I mean, these strategies work, and that's why we're sharing them. And you can go out and do it, but it is faster and easier to get help. And it doesn't have to be paying a coach. It could be some other form of accountability or support, but definitely lean on others. Makes it a lot easier.
Yes. Yeah, and I think there's just something too when you say a commitment out loud to another person who you know is going to check to see
Hmm.
if you did that thing,
Yeah,
that just increases the likelihood that you're going to do it by quite a bit.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we've got a little bit of time left, and I want to dig in a little bit to, we brought it up very briefly earlier, but the self-esteem piece within all of this. So as you start to be able to, navigate what focus and productivity looks like, learn your habits, know yourself, build some of these habits and routines in that are nourishing and sustainable and help you move towards your goals. But the self-esteem and the comparison things are still very prevalent barriers. How do you navigate these in your work?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it can be a barrier, and how we talk to ourselves makes a difference because if if you grew up with ADHD, you probably had teachers and parents on your case, not understanding why you can't just get it together, thinking you're not listening or whatever. And if you don't have ADHD, you may have had similar things. And some people have had past trauma and all kinds of things that get in your head. And then to add to that, we speak to ourselves in a negative way. And I think that um, that's so important to be aware of what you're saying to yourself. I, I ask my clients sometimes, I say, would you talk to a friend the way you're talking to yourself right now? And if you did, would they still be your friend? Why do we do that to ourselves? Um, and then that you mentioned comparison.
Mhm.
I think we have to be careful, especially as entrepreneurs, to not compare our chapter one to somebody else's chapter 10. If you're just starting out in business, it takes a while, you know, um, and everybody brings different background and experience and issues into what they're doing, whether it's business or something else. And so be careful about social media because you're comparing your real life to somebody's highlight reel, and that may not be the true, or it may not be the whole story. It may be true, but it may not be the whole story of
Yeah.
what's going on in their life because they're not going to show you that part. So go easy on yourself. Be kind to yourself because if you're an entrepreneur, it's tough. You have to have resiliency. You have to, you know, take a lot of rejection. And so you have to be your own best friend. And it starts with what you're saying to yourself.
Right. Yeah. It's I love that you bring this in with the type of coaching that you do because I came from a mental health background as well. I think we talked about this on the show.
Mhm.
So I worked in community mental health and so we did a lot of like CBT, DBT, thought work, where you're
Yeah,
recognizing some of the things you say to yourself and it really does work. Like this is
yeah, it does.
evidence-based stuff. But it takes time and practice and it feels uncomfortable at first. Are there any things that you do to support people and kind of like bridging that gap or making it more accessible for them to get some of those shifts with their mindset.
Well, I think just having the group is one of the best ways. Having hearing other people reflect back um, something positive to you helps you go, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have been so hard on myself. You know, that helps, I think. Just getting around people who um not people who are gonna just flatter you, but people who are gonna support you even when you mess up.
Yeah.
That's important.
That's so important. Just leaning into that supportive community. And if you don't have it, finding one, cultivating one. Sometimes we are blessed to have really supportive and encouraging communities, within our family and our friends and our professional circles, and some not so much. And you have to go out and create that for yourself or find an existing group and join and be part of it so that you
Yeah.
can get that kind of support from other people who get it and who can see you and reflect that back. I love that.
Mhm.
So, is there anything else around the lines of self-esteem comparison before we kind of move on and get closer to wrapping up the show? I want to make sure we didn't leave any lingering things that you really wanted to share on that piece left unsaid.
No, I guess I would just say be careful about thinking about yourself too much. Um, because there's a lot of people who will tell you to think about yourself, stand in the mirror and say these affirmations and do self-care and do all, and that's all great. Nothing wrong with that. But what I've found is that when I start to think about serving other people, um, then I'm more confident, just by
Mm,
default. Um, like I'm doing some speaking now, and I'm branching out, trying to book more in-person stages for speaking. And public speaking is something people are afraid of a lot of times. One of the most common fears, and one of the things that my trainers have taught me is if you just think about serving the people and think about your audience and what you're giving them that's going to help them, and don't think about yourself, what you look like. I mean, I've gained weight and I'm like, I don't want to, I, I don't look good or whatever. Nobody cares. If you're sharing something that's life changing for them, the only person that's so caught up in feeling bad about yourself is you. And
mm,
so, do some things where you're getting outside of yourself. I mean, hey, I'll just share with your audience. I met my husband when I was serving the homeless. We were both serving the homeless. And so you do service, you never know what will happen. To always tease and say, well, I met him at the homeless shelter and just cleaned him up and took him home. We were really both serving the homeless. But anyway, when you do things that get you outside of yourself, then you're not feeling, I wasn't feeling bad about myself when I was serving the homeless. I was thinking about how grateful I was that I wasn't homeless. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, to be able to
and
give
so you got
back.
to do some of that too.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting the conversation to go that way, and I'm so glad that you brought that up because you're right. You have to align your life with service and with purpose.
Mhm.
It's great to have passion and success and all of the things that we want, but purpose and service are what actually fuel that. And it looks different for different people, but finding the people that you are called to serve in the way that lights you up, in your unique
Mhm.
way, like that gives you energy and commitment like nothing else. I mean, I think I can attribute everything I've ever accomplished to that service mentality. If I didn't have that, I don't know that I would have had the perseverance to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So before we come to the end here, I did want to open up one final question to you, and that is just, do you notice any specific challenges or hurdles within your female population? We do have primarily female listeners, not all on the show. And there's unique challenges when you're a woman and trying to navigate life and family and work. What do you see showing up for the women you work with, and is there anything you would say to them?
Well, you just opened a whole can of worms. There's a lot.
Shouldn't have maybe waited till the end, but here
I
we are.
mean, there are physical things going on, like hormonal changes that affect your emotions and your energy level. Um, there's body image things going on where um, it makes you not as confident to uh, put yourself out there. With ADHD, there's a thing called rejection sensitive dysphoria, where you tend to exaggerate things in your mind, where somebody you walk past somebody in the office and they're whispering and your brain just automatically goes, oh my gosh, they're talking about me, and they probably weren't saying anything about you. There's a little bit of paranoia in there. So you have some of those things to deal with. And I think just expectations and roles, and every family is different, but if you're expected to be the one who does all of the housework and take care of the kids and work, that's putting a lot of pressure on just one partner in the marriage if you're married. Um, so I don't know, it's just a lot of different things. I'm my parents are older. We just lost my mom this summer, and because I'm a female, I found myself feeling like I got to take care of my parents now, Um, and when you're younger, I got to take care of the kids. And so somewhere you've got to find that balance, and you have to have good communication with your spouse about, working things out. Like, we don't have any kids in the house now, but um, my husband loves it when I cook at home and not go out to eat. So the deal is, if I cook, he does the dishes. So we've worked that out. He'll complain, "Oh, I don't want to do the dishes." Okay, take me out then. He's like, I'll do the dishes. And it's just, we joke about it, but you have to be able to um sometimes just let go of some of those expectations of everything. Your life is not going to look like a Pinterest pin. you know, you
Yeah.
have to just be okay with the mess sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful advice, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you. It was hard, but she was in her 80s, so she had a long, good life.
Yeah, still makes it hard when we have to say goodbye. And like you said,
Mhm.
being a woman too, and then all the things that we either take on ourselves or put on ourselves or expectations of others, and it's such
Mhm.
tangible advice to just be in good communication with the people around you, recognize and don't hold yourself to these impossible standards. Or if you catch
Right,
yourself, maybe try to reel it in a little.
right. Yep.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been such a good conversation. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up and say goodbye? Any just final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered a lot, and I think if your audience would just take one thing and try it this week, one thing that jumped out at them. Don't try to do it all.
Yeah.
Just one thing and
Yeah.
start there.
All right. Well, before I say goodbye, I know you mentioned that there's a free gift that we can put in the show notes. So I want to make sure
Yeah.
I have that so I can put that in there for everybody. How can people stay connected with you? Where can they find you? There will be links in the show notes, but I always like to hear from the guests as well.
Yeah. Well, I have a free Facebook group, and you're going to put the link in there. And I do free training and every week in there. Um, I'm on Instagram with CBC underscore Cindy Baker Coaching. My website is cindybakercoaching.com. And I'm either Cindy Baker or Cindy Baker Coaching on almost all the socials. So follow me there. And I'm on LinkedIn. I think I'm on LinkedIn as Cindy Ash Baker because Ash was my maiden name. But they'll find me. You'll
Perfect.
see the picture.
Yeah.
Her.
Amazing. Well, get connected with Cindy, follow her on all the places, check out the resources, and if it's a good fit, reach out and talk about what coaching would look like. I think everyone should have a coach, a therapist, and a mentor. Like we need all of it.
Yeah.
So definitely check out her work, stay connected, and do what she asked. Find one thing, start there whatever sounded the most interesting or the most helpful to you from listening. This has been such a pleasure, such a joy. Thank you for sharing your time, energy, and wisdom with us. I will talk to you soon. And to everybody that's listening, take care of yourselves and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you want more resources on thriving in your life or want details on working with me, check out my website at internallyguidedleadership.com or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Internally Guided Coach. Be gentle with yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.